how often do you actually open up, share your emotions and talk about your struggles with other men? So for myself, growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and always feeling different and feeling like, I can remember feeling just like this, some of you may understand this, but feeling like this soft, like overly emotional boy. And I can remember like when I first started middle school, and for the first couple of weeks my mum would walk me to the gates of the school, and as I was getting closer and closer to the gates, like holding my mum's hand, I would be crying, and it was just fear of going into something that I didn't think that I could handle. And I used to cry, and my mum would give me a cuddle, and she'd say to me, once you've finished school, I'll be here waiting for you to come and pick you up, and I'll give you a Mars bar, or I'll bring you whatever chocolate bar you want. Normally it was a Mars bar. Ironically, I can't eat Mars bars now because I'm gluten free. Anyway, so I always felt like that, like weak, soft, overly emotional boy when I was younger. Then when I went up to upper school, I still remember feeling, at 13, like I was still that weak, overly emotional boy. Now, after the first sort of few months of being in year 9 and starting sort of upper school, this is when I started to actually look around and just see how other boys were being, and it just became so prevalent for me to actually recognise that I am different. I am this weak, soft boy, and all the other boys are, what you'd probably call now as lads. They were having fun, they were pissing about in class, they had groups of girls around them, they were like class clowns, and so my way of almost like dealing with that, and dealing with that feeling of being different to them, I then decided that I obviously need to change. Like, I'm obviously not, I'm obviously not showing up as, how a boy should be showing up. So I decided to really start almost like changing who I was showing up as, and this led me down the path of experimenting with drugs and alcohol and different behaviours in school that effectively I thought were cool and would make me fit in more. Now, from that point and going through upper school, I actually got kicked out towards the end of year 10, and I kind of, the behaviour that I'd adopted leading up to the point where I was getting kicked out of school, I kind of felt like I was actually, I was one of them boys. I was one of them boys that, was surrounded by girls, and I was one of them boys that, other boys would look at, the sort of like geekier boys would look at and sort of think, oh, he's cool, which, it's ridiculous. So the moment I got kicked out of school, this really was the huge wake-up call that I needed. And the day that I got kicked out of school, I can remember walking home and telling my dad, and as soon as I told my dad, I could just see the disappointment on his face. And it was that at the time I was scared of my dad, not from the point of, I thought he was going to beat the shit out of me, but he had a level of like authority, and like he had presence, and you just sort of knew that when your dad said no, it meant no. And I started going upstairs, and my dad followed me into my bedroom, and I just looked at him, and I burst out crying, and he just put his arms around me. And from that moment, I recognised that I've always struggled since then to actually open up and express my emotions. And I think it's probably because I'd attached me sharing and opening up and and just showing my emotions. There was an attachment to that of like disappointment, and which obviously led me down another path after getting kicked out of school and entering sort of early adulthood, where this made me sort of go further into myself and suppress all my emotions even further. So going out, drinking, smoking, doing drugs, doing anything I basically could to really not feel what I needed to feel. And I can remember like first speaking to my first girlfriend, and obviously this was before we got together, but I can remember like worrying that if I actually got into a relationship with her, that she would see that actually I'm not the lad that I portray myself to be, that goes out at weekends and is has a laugh and a joke and gets pissed with his mates and is really just a lad. I'm actually deep down underneath all that I am emotional, and I do have struggles, and I do have things going on that I don't like talking about, and I'm not the person that I portray myself to be. And that was a huge fear for me. And what I actually noticed, like the more we spoke, the more I was able to actually be myself and open up. We got into a relationship, and I got myself to a point where I was able to open up to a level, but I still kept a lot of myself hidden away. And it was by no means her fault. It was stuff that I still hadn't allowed myself to feel, and I'd still shamed myself for a lot of these things that I was feeling. Now, from that point, probably a lot of you have heard this, but from that point I actually acted out in our relationship, and I cheated, and to be honest, I wasn't particularly a nice person. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I was shit and I was a terrible person, but if you put it down on paper, a lot of people would say that I was a shit person, and that's something that I had to deal with for a while. Now, the guilt because of that, again, almost sort of made me want to just suppress everything again. And anyway, years later, getting towards my late 20s, early 30s, after what happened in my last relationship, that really was that kick in the balls to say that, Dan, you need to fucking sort your shit out and really start opening up, because if you don't love yourself and you're still struggling with things that you don't want others to see, you're never actually going to have a fulfilling relationship. And that's when I really started to take a deep dive into all the inner work. Now, right now I'm at a point where I'm really allowing myself to feel things. I've recently applied for counselling, and the reason why I've applied for counselling is because I still have some trauma around my upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness, and I know for my own healing, and so I can serve my clients better, so I can be a better partner, so I can be a better man, ultimately, I need to still go back to my childhood and heal some things there. Now, as men, we struggle to, first of all, admit to ourselves exactly how we're feeling. And in my personal experience, and some of the men that I've either supported or just had conversations with, they're in a position where they know that they aren't the man that they want to be, and they also feel ashamed that they're putting a lot of pressure on their girlfriend or wife, and this only makes them feel even less of a man. But the reality is, if as men we haven't either been shown unconditional love or been allowed the space to actually open up and talk about how we're feeling from a very young age, then we're almost going to go through life believing that actually we shouldn't even be feeling what we're feeling. So as soon as we do feel an emotion that feels uncomfortable, if we don't allow ourselves to actually feel it and express that emotion, we'll start to suppress it. And when you suppress emotions, these emotions just get trapped in our body, and they can manifest as mental health issues, physical illnesses. There are various different things that these suppressed emotions will manifest as. But in my opinion, just suppressing emotions is obviously not only detrimental to our physical and mental health, but is also detrimental to our loved ones, and our partner and our children, and family, parents. It's detrimental to everyone around us. And if you think about it, how many men actually feel safe to open up with another man and be truly vulnerable and talk about their struggles and things that they're going through? Very few. Now, this is probably the reason why a lot of men that feel unhappy and miserable and that are struggling with things put a lot of this onto our partners, and then our partners have to sort of carry the load, which we know deep down that isn't fair on them. And also we know that we're not showing up as the man that we want to be and they deserve us to be. So we have an opportunity to, once we feel that emotion, if we haven't got other men in our lives that we can actually open up to, and I don't mean tell them what we want them to hear, but really open up and lay all our cards on the table and really tell them I'm fucking struggling right now, and really be honest. Then we have to look elsewhere, and whether it's counselling, whether it's getting a coach, whether it's getting a mentor, whatever it is that you need to do it. Don't shut yourself away and bury your head and believe that you're less of a man for reaching out and actually admitting that you're struggling, because if you're struggling and you're not reaching out and getting the support and the help that you need, that is actually making you less of a man, because a man owns his emotions, a man recognises his limits, and a man reaches out for the help and support that he needs, because he doesn't do it. If he doesn't do it, he knows that those around him that deserve him to be at his best aren't going to get that and are also going to suffer. So I really want you to just think about that message, and try and hear that without actually shaming and judging yourself and guilting yourself. Like, hear that message, hear it and feel it. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, and if you know that you need help and support, reach out and get the help and support that you need, because you know that you're not the man that you want to be, and there is a better version of yourself waiting for you to step in.